Hello, I'm Ruben Gonzalez Vera. This is my ID. My name is Ruben Vera, and I will be discussing intermittent fasting for the informative speech. Now, every American has been socialized to believe that we need 3 square meals a day along with a healthy serving of breakfast in order to keep ourselves healthy, wealthy, and wise. However, with further research, you'll see that is not the case. Today, we will be discussing intermittent fasting. Now, intermittent fasting is also called time-restricted eating in the scientific literature, and it is not to be confused with the religious practice of fasting, which is usually done in order to gain some sort of closeness with one's spiritual beliefs. Now, my credibility would be that I've also done intermittent fasting in the past, along with witnessing and helping out other people I've known in my life to do so, and they've all witnessed positive effects. And the point of this would be to bring forward a new way of health and nutrition that is not focused on what you eat or how you eat it, but instead the time in which you eat everything you would usually eat over the course of a day. Now, for our discussion, there will be 4 facets. We'll be discussing what is intermittent fasting, the biological processes that occur, the history of intermittent fasting, along with any future applications of intermittent fasting as a way of presenting information and helping bring in more topics that would then be balanced in a nutritional approach. Now, what is intermittent fasting to say? Intermittent fasting is also known as time-restricted eating, in which the time period in which you'd be eating is shrunken down and the rest of the time would be considered to not eat, also known as fasting. It's also called time-restricted eating in the scientific literature, and it is not to be confused with dry fasting or wet fasting. Now, some common misconceptions is that it is not dry fasting or wet fasting or water fasting, and it is also not considered a religious fast because the purposes with normal fasting is to gain some sort of health advantage or some mental clarity over the course of the person's objectives. Furthermore, intermittent fasting has some common concerns that people usually ask about that need to be addressed first. For example, dealing with hunger, starvation, and muscle loss. Now, with hunger and starvation, as the body starts to adapt to intermittent fasting over the course of 3 to 4 days, there's a hormone that is secreted called ghrelin, which gets modified. Now, ghrelin is a hormone that allows for us to suddenly gain hunger. In research by Dr. Jason Fung, studying over a 2-week period of patients who undergo intermittent fasting, their ghrelin profile changes for usually upticks in the mornings when they're about to eat and at every other time in which they have their meal. But after converting to intermittent fasting, the secretion changes and their hunger is satiated. And on top of that, what we see is that the liver glycogen profile of these patients after going through this fast has not depleted as much as thought, meaning that there's no muscle degradation or any sort of like a nutritional damage that occurs as a result. Now we are on to the first 12 hours of what's going on in your body during intermittent fasting. Now, your body has a metabolic order, in a sense, when it comes to processing nutrients and deriving energy from such. We first go through the available components that are inside your stomach and the nearby blood sugar and part of your liver glycogen profile. And as a result, when that is very, very much depleted, not 100% depleted, but starting to get halfway, your body then starts breaking down fat as a means of energy in order to prevent damage to the rest of the body. This release of fat into the body releases something called ketone bodies. And this entire process in which the ketone bodies are released from fat and used as a form of energy across the body is called ketosis. Now, we need to be aware that this process of ketosis has various differences compared to the normal style in which our body derives energy from glycogen and carbohydrates. With fat stores, ketone bodies are released and they actually have differing hormonal effects on the body as a result. And with glycogen storage, we can see that it needs a steady uptick of consumption in order to keep its energy levels high and consistent. Meanwhile, with fat storage-based systems, we see that there's actually a constant level of ketones occurring during the means of the fast, or the 16 hours which you would not be eating. Now, as shown with this chart over here, you would see the spikes in blood sugar that would occur as a result of someone eating, and then not eating, and then eating again, as you would in a normal 3 meals a day eating style. Now, the effects of such would include being satiated, as discussed in the research we have with Dr. Jason Fung, fat loss, as discussed with the process of ketosis, and mental clarity. Because interestingly enough, when ketone bodies are released, it actually triggers the secretion of a hormone called BDNF in the body. Now, BDNF stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which would mean that the brain cells actually start growing and forming new ones as a result. Now let's go on to the history of intermittent fasting. Now, in caveman times, we would have our hunter-gatherer societies that would focus on capturing a big animal, such as a mammoth, and then trying to live off of that as much as possible. Now, due to the predators and other conflicts of that time period, having 3 square meals a day was just not practical nor possible. So what would happen as a practice would be that they would eat 1 meal a day and then fast for the other rest of the day, so then they can keep on their toes, be active, and be vigilant against predators. Funny enough, this is actually why some consider the theory of intermittent fasting being the reason that humans have actually had an increased capacity in their brain cells ever since a few million years ago as a result of this almost starvation and preconditioning stress that has occurred. As we go on through history, we will then see that fasting is not only used as a way of survival, but as a way of connection to their higher order. For example, you would see this most commonly with Ramadan and Lent, in which there is almost a sacrificial element of not eating and abstaining from any sort of material sustenance, as someone considered that the feeling of the fast would bring them closer to their higher order and or God. Now, in modern times, what we see here is that it is brought up again, but in 2 different circles online. That would include the use of social media with fitness influencers and the self-improvement space, as they both cite it as a way to have flexibility with their lifestyle, gain mental clarity, and be able to achieve more of their day. Now, with the future research, what we see here is that professors like Dr. David Sinclair have proposed fasting as a protocol to possibly increase longevity and prevent damage to the cells, as the preconditioning stress of not having food would actually cause the body to run more efficiently and actually even remove some damaging cells in the body, as discussed in his book, Lifespan, Why We Age and How We Can Stop It. Furthermore, what you'll see is that in Alzheimer's medication, some have even started considering using intermittent fasting as a protocol to even increase the effectiveness of Alzheimer's medication and even reduce some of the symptoms, as discussed in a TED Talk by Dr. Mark Madsen. Furthermore, what we'll see here is that many college students, whether it be from economic stresses or just time efficiency, have switched accidentally to intermittent fasting as a way to go through the day much more efficiently, be able to focus more in classes, and even get higher grades as a result. To conclude, intermittent fasting would be a form of eating in which we focus not on what you eat, but instead the restricted time period in which you would do so. As a result, we would then be able to go over what is intermittent fasting, what happens in the body, the history as such, and any future applications of what it can have in the future. Hopefully, this can serve as a method to then be able to have another talking point and way to think about diet and exercise and your nutrition in the future. Here are my references. Thank you.